Everyone to this session with Professor Craig White, Associate Dean of Research. It's 10 o'clock, so we'll get going. I'm sure there'll probably be a few more people dropping in the next minute or two. So essentially during this session today, Craig's going to discuss and answer some of your questions and concerns in relation to COVID-19. And there'll also be an opportunity at the end for you to ask any additional questions for him to answer as well. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. If everyone could please just make sure that their cameras and audio are turned off so we can make sure that we can carry on without too much internet disturbance. If you have questions that come up throughout, please send them to me using the Zoom group chat function. And you can send them to me privately as well if you prefer. And then at the end of the session, I'll read out the questions that have come through the chat and we'll have a bit of time for Craig to answer those as well. So rather than at the end, everybody having a chance to ask their questions verbally, if you can just send them through in the chat and I will ask them at the end of the session, that would be great. Also, just to note that this session is being recorded and will be made available afterwards through the Orbit page and also on the workplace group. So if you're not already part of the workplace group, I'm going to take this opportunity to encourage you to jump on there and check it out. We are trying to post some stuff on there to keep us all connected while we're all working from home as well. So thank you very much, Craig, for giving us this time today to come in and answer some of our questions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks everyone for coming, and I will do my very best to answer all of the questions I can. Unfortunately, the answer to some of them is going to be, I currently don't know, but we will then go out and try and get some answers to them. So I'm going to try and answer as honestly and comprehensively as I can, and if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to give you a party line or anything weird like that. So I'll start by just reading out the 7 questions that have been sent to me and answering those as best I can. So the first question is, with our current inability to work in labs, there's been lots of talk around this being a great time to write papers, which it might be for some. However, everyone has to adjust to this new way of working, and many ECRs are also juggling other commitments, such as looking after children who are at home, and this will result in reduced productivity over this time. We wish to know that the expectations of our research capacity are being adjusted accordingly, not only for lack of access to labs, and that this will reflect not reflect poorly on us when it comes time for performance reviews and applying for promotions. And the clear answer to that one is that expectations are adjusted accordingly. I think everyone understands that this is a challenging time and that the extent to which it is challenging is going to vary person to person based on their own individual circumstances. Probably the clearest answer to this was contained in the Provost's email to everyone yesterday, which I think was the first time it was very clearly articulated. And that was that Monash has processes that are capable of taking into account interruptions caused by the virus when reviewing probation periods and applications for academic promotion. And my experience sitting on promotion panels and reviewing promotion documents is that these sorts of exceptional circumstances are taken very seriously and are very definitely considered when these processes take place. So yes, expectations are being adjusted accordingly. What is probably important from the perspective of all the individuals here is to make sure that you can document the nature of the disruption that took place, because it's going to be difficult for people on these panels to understand what the individual circumstances were for everyone. So just sort of saying disruption due to COVID is going to possibly not cut it for all folks. So just having an understanding and keeping track of what the scale of the disruption is so that information can be provided when these processes take place. Okay. The second question is very similar, but I'll answer it as well. So there are concerns about how annual performance reviews and career progression would be affected, especially if research output is reduced and SETU scores drop, and whether the upper management would be a bit more relaxed on their expectations for the next couple of years. So this one also touches on SETU scores and their role. So the answer is the same as above. The processes do have the capacity to take into account interruptions. And there will, of course, be an understanding that SETU scores are going to be strange this year. We're all adjusting to a very new way of teaching, and the students are coming in possibly with expectations that are going to be difficult to meet. It's very important for us all to do the best job that we can with the teaching so that we can retain the students and we can provide them the educational experience that we're hoping to receive. But it is a challenging time, and so a drop in set-due scores or an alteration of set-due scores will be understandable given the current circumstances. Okay. The third question is, will there be provision for ECRs on fixed-term contracts who are unable to do their research during the shutdown? Will they be able to extend their contracts proportionally? So my honest answer here is that I don't know. There are a couple of circumstances that make it difficult to plan for this at present. So firstly, we don't have an understanding of how long this situation will last. And probably the most pointy part is that we don't know what the financial impact of this will be on the university. So the university is driven by undergraduate and coursework enrolments. Those are what pay cross-subsidised research, essentially. And we don't currently know, because we haven't yet reached the census date, what the impact of the global situation will be on our student enrolments. And once we know that, we will then be able to start to develop an understanding of what that financial impact might be on other areas of operations. The clear message that I've received from the Dean is that the plan is to ensure that we can continue to employ the folk that we have currently employed, but I don't know what the situation will be as contracts come to an end. So I'm sorry that I can't provide a more clear answer to that one, but at this point, we don't have enough information to know what will be possible. That situation will improve over the next couple of weeks as we pass the undergraduate census date. Okay, so we have another related question here. So for those whose contracts are due to expire soon, finding another position is unlikely while everything is locked down, especially as many of these will be overseas. And will the university be able to support such people? And this issue is especially pertinent for those on temporary sponsored visas whose ability to remain legally in the country is contingent on them being employed by Monash. And once their contracts end, they're ineligible for government support. So here the same uncertainty is a problem, and we should have a clearer understanding of the situation in the coming weeks and months. What we do know at present, however, is that contract extensions are currently taking more time than usual, and because of the current uncertainty regarding the university's financial position, require a higher level of approval than usual. So my advice for folk in this situation who have contracts ending in the coming weeks and months is to start discussing options with your supervisor as soon as possible. So at a broader level, as we now are starting to get a handle on the undergraduate teaching, so people have transitioned their teaching and they're understanding what they're going to do, we are now starting to think about how best to cope and support folk through this current unknown duration working from home period. So we are starting to look a little bit beyond the immediate horizon of how do we deal with the undergraduates to how are we going to continue to be functioning over this next period. So now is a good time to start raising these issues with your supervisor. And if you have any other, if you want to raise it outside of that, there are also your research directors in your school, or you're welcome to email me. It's craig.white@monash.edu, and we'll try and at least provide an answer as best we can. Okay, so is there any discussion or possibility on shifting project, for example, DECRA and other funding application dates due to this situation? So yes, there is certainly a possibility. I'm not aware that anything has been decided for the fellowship schemes, which are due towards the end of this year as yet. So the ARC were initially reluctant to move deadlines, and they had an individual case-by-case process in place where people who had applications in looming rounds could individually apply for an extension. I assume that everyone then applied for an extension, and so now they've shifted the deadlines altogether. So they've extended the deadlines for the linkage infrastructure, equipment and facilities round, for the linkage schemes, and for a special research initiatives round. They haven't moved deadlines for the fellowships, but they have demonstrated that they have the capacity to do so if that's necessary. So there are ongoing discussions at the highest level with sort of Rebecca Brown's office and the ARC and other group of 8 Deputy Vice Chancellors for research about this. At present, their focus is on the NHMRC ideas round, which is the next big deadline. And so the discussion is about that. But I imagine once that round's taken place, then folk will start thinking about what the landscape is and whether the other ARC deadlines will need to be moved. The 6th question is in regard to the Faculty of Science Advancing Women's Success grant holders. Grant was supposed to be used by 30th of September. Will there be any adjustments to Monash grants with timeframes for their use? That's certainly possible. If anyone would like to alter the timelines of their faculty grants, please feel free to just contact the research office, the faculty research office, and talk about what sort of change you'd like to have made, and we can take care of that. And the final question is, do you have any advice for managing honours and third year research project students that have very limited time? I don't have any advice for the third year research project students, but for honours students, there was a communication from the Associate Deans for Graduate Research and Education, Pete Betts and Chris Thompson. They contacted all supervisors and students late last week, which took place via each of the school honours coordinators. So at this stage, the students will receive a 1-month extension. Desktop-based students should be working from home, and lab-based students should also be working from home. And the current plan is that they will undertake an intensive research project in the second semester. So the advice for managing them is mainly about paying attention to the communications that come from the honours coordinator, but most importantly is to remain in contact with them and you continue to provide support for them. You know, as each of all of us are feeling uncertainty about this, are all of the people that we're responsible for, and it's very easy, as I'm sure you've experienced with the communication that's coming through the university somewhat irregularly in this complex situation. Maintaining clear communication and just remaining in contact is extremely important. So an important part of managing students is going to be just staying in touch with them. So that's the 7 questions I was asked in advance. If anyone wants to follow up or ask any other questions, have a go.
All right, we've had a couple of questions coming through on the chat. So this is around contracts.
Yep.
And a form for a new contract being sent to HR before the shutdown, but the university doesn't want to change the contract to a new one from a casual contract to a fixed term contract. Would you have any information on why that might be, Craig?
I don't know about any of the specifics, but I guess it would be around the university is unsure of what financial support it can provide going forward. So I suspect it's being held up while the financial details are being worked out. So it's probably just sitting in there. I know that there are challenges in getting contracts approved.
Yeah. So the university census date, is that the 15th of April?
14th, yes.
Yes. Okay. So we're about 1 week off from that. So perhaps after that, there's going to be a little bit more certainty around what the future of contracts and things might look like.
I hope so, yes. That should be the point where we understand if all of our undergraduates have left. And we hope they haven't.
Yes. Okay. So perhaps for questions and things relating to contract extensions and changes of contracts and all of those sorts of things, waiting another week until we know what the financial impact is on the university, and that's probably a better time to.
Yeah, so we'll know, we'll have an understanding of undergraduate enrolments around the 14th of census date, and then it'll probably take a little time for that to filter through. So I would still say that having the discussions with your supervisor, line manager, that's appropriate to be having that now. They might not be able to provide answers, or they might not be able to provide certainty at this point, but it will be important for them to know what's on the radar as they have to then do their own budgetary planning.
Yeah. All right. Another question that I'm sure we're probably all wondering, and I don't know if you will have the answer to this, is if you have any indication of how long we may be working under these situations.
No, I mean, at this point, I guess the hope is that undergraduate teaching will take place on campus in second semester. But we don't know if that's the case. I think the Prime Minister indicated something along the lines of a 6-month timeline recently. And so a lot of these decisions may be out of our hands. But we are sort of, I guess, loosely planning that students will be on campus in second semester, but we really don't know.
Yeah.
That's part of the challenge.
Yeah, the messages from the Prime Minister seem to be this could be about 6 months that we're in this type of lockdown situation. So I guess we'll just wait and see what information comes from that top leadership at the country and then coming down through leadership in the university as well.
Yeah, so the university leadership do engage with government in trying to make clear what needs to happen on campus. So part of the critical research principles that came out was born from a discussion internally in the university about what we would like the government to allow us to do if there was a really hard lockdown. And so there is a communication line between us and the government. But yeah, in terms of the timeline, we don't know that.
Yeah. Although there is some great research going on at Monash. I don't know if anyone's been following along on the Twitter and things around people finding, early detection methods and potential drugs that can kill it in vitro. So far, not yet in humans. So fingers crossed, our excellent research keeps going and we might be able to shorten that period a little bit.
So I think part of the critical research principles that Monash put in place and other universities put in place was to allow that kind of research to continue to happen on campus unencumbered. And so I think all of the universities are throwing themselves at that problem.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any more questions that anyone had? I'll give you a minute to send them through in the chat. Nothing else has come through in the meantime while we've just been chatting away.
While people are thinking, I'll just remind, if you do want to get in touch with me, you are welcome. So you can send me emails. I will try and answer them.
Thanks, Craig. Well, it seems like there are no more questions coming through. So we've been very efficient this morning getting through that, which is nice to see. I'm sure everybody's got lots of other things that they need to go and get on with in their day. So, I mean, again, if you do have other questions, as Craig has said, you can get in touch with him, particularly if they're of more of a personal nature. Or as you've mentioned, you can contact the faculty research office or your direct supervisor as well, depending on what the different concerns are. But otherwise, is there anything else that you wanted to finish up with, Craig?
So I guess I'll add that, so two things. First, if folk do find this useful, feedback to Margaret, and I'm happy to turn up as often as is useful and answer questions as best I can. And then secondly, just to reiterate that, across all levels of the university leadership, there is an understanding of how impactful this is on folk. You will have seen the messaging about this is what you could do is write papers or do meta-analyses and that thing. That's really about trying to provide options for folk to maintain some kind of productivity while we're in this difficult situation, because it will come to an end and we will have to come out the other side of it and hopefully continue to be successful and folk have their careers go forward. So I know that messaging can be taken as the university cracking a whip. It's really just intended to try and help people find a way to get through this as best they can. And then over the next little period, the groups that I meet with, which includes, I meet regularly every few days with all of the research directors from the schools. I meet every day with the dean and the faculty leadership, and I meet once or so a week with the Rebecca Brown, the Senior Vice Provost for Research. And we are starting to turn our attention to how we support folk through this and how we all sort of get through it and do useful things and support one another. So we are sort of working on that problem now as we've moved past the teaching challenges.
Yeah. All right, well, yeah, do feedback to me if this is a useful way to help keep that chain of communication open. As this is a changing situation, this is something that we could do. I mean, I take advice from you, Craig, but perhaps monthly if it's useful as we're sort of going.
I guess maybe if people feedback to you that it's useful, I would probably go with maybe 2 weeks in the first instance, because it's changing less rapidly now, but still quite rapidly, and then over time it'll settle down. So if people want one in 2 weeks, that's fine. 4 weeks, also fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, please send me your feedback then as to whether this was useful and if you would like to have another one again in about 2 weeks' time. It seems that we can do it within about 20 minutes, so it's not a huge lengthy session. Just, yeah, to keep that communication going, and so everyone has a chance to air their concerns and touch base, and it's good just to get together as an ECR community as well. So there are no more questions that have come through, so I guess we will wrap up the session then. So again, thank you very much, Craig, for yours this morning. It's very valuable to hear that information from you and see your face and know that we're still all in this together. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded, so it will be made available to you all shortly, and for anyone who wasn't able to make it as well, it will be available either on Orbit or the workplace group. And again, do jump on the workplace group. I know it hasn't taken off in the past, but now that we're all in isolation, it is a great little way just to share some things. I've put some information up on there and a few bits of kind of just some funny stuff as well. So do jump on and have a look. Otherwise, I hope you all have a lovely Easter long weekend, and we'll catch up again in the future soon, I'm sure. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.